All right, we are back with Dr. Kelly Garrett, and we are transitioning from our talk on the Emergency Management Professionals Program, which we had mentioned that the deadline for that is June 1st, 2022. So if you want to apply for that, get on there and get that done, get that application process completed and submitted. And good luck with that as you move forward and actually try to get that. And if you don't get it this time, keep trying because it is a competitive process. But we're going to transition to right now. We're going to talk more about leadership and its application and how we can apply it as a professional to establish and move the profession forward. So Dr. Garrett, we've touched on a few of these areas, but I'd like to elaborate on them a little bit more on how we can not only build up the professional to be a better leader and influencer in emergency management, but how in doing that, it can help us drive and promote the profession better. What are your thoughts?
That's a great question, Dan, and it's one that we struggle with quite a bit. And it's a subject of great conversations with the students and in the advanced and executive academies in particular, because we really do focus on this notion of what are we trying to do to better influence our career field and get people to understand the roles that we play and the responsibilities that we have within the profession. On the first day of the Executive Academy, we now go through an exercise which is really cast in the terms of an innovation tournament, where we go through a rapid brainstorming event to try to get all the students involved in not only better forming as a community, but to focus on how can we develop a collaborative definition of emergency management. And as the students go through the process, we find that a lot of times those definitions tend to focus on what we do and not necessarily who we are. So we focus on what emergency managers do, but we don't really focus on who emergency managers are and what that means to other people in the public sector. And that makes it a little difficult, I think, to resonate with the public if we focus on what we do, because most of the definitions invariably have the 5 mission areas included in that definition. And that doesn't really resonate with the general public because it makes sense to us as those involved in the profession, but the general public isn't going to really understand that. But if we talk about who we are and what that means for the community, and in the fact that we can coordinate the resources to help a community become more resilient after a disaster strikes or something along those lines, I think that resonates a little bit easier. And you and I talked earlier about better marketing and helping everybody understand what it is that we bring to the table. And I think if we focus on that notion of who we are, rather than necessarily exactly what we do, that's a better conversation to have.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. And I think this is one of the line of thoughts that I want to chase down a little bit more in just my everyday research is how we actually apply what it is that we do into reaching the people that we're doing it for. A lot of it is, as you said, is who we are, right? But marketing at different levels can let people know who we are, whether that be in our organization itself, marketing who we are, or the greater community in which we establish who we are. But a lot of it too, when it comes to anything that just think of yourself as a consumer, right? You consume or you purchase or you go after things that interest you and that potentially benefit you. So how do we, as the emergency managers, market ourselves as who we are to the larger community in a way that lets them know that it's beneficial to them? Because ultimately, what's in it for them? And that's how you really get people, right? So when it comes to having them understand who we are, then we get them in, right? We get their attention, and then we establish what it is how it benefits them, and then how important it is that what we do is for them. Because ultimately, emergency management is service. It's service to other people. We are a service-driven industry, and we need to treat it as such. We are there for others. We're not there for ourselves. I mean, yeah, great as an individual. I love what I do. I love being an emergency manager. I love practicing emergency management, but I'm transitioning from being the guy in the office, being the guy out there doing the job, to now transitioning to a point to where I want to push the profession and teach the individuals that are in my spot now to do it. So it comes to as much as I love emergency management and being the guy doing the job, I'm transitioning out of that into an area where I'm teaching the emergency management professional, and I'm teaching them how to better market, and I'm teaching them how to be better community representatives, and basically boil it down to customer service. So how do we, are we applying it correctly now in how we practice emergency management, or does that need to change in your opinion?
Oh, that's a great question, Dan. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to that. My observation over the years has been, because we're a career field that deals with disasters, we tend to work best in reactionary mode, and there has to be some sort of perceived crisis to really spur toward taking action, rather than being able to sit back and more holistically look at what is it that needs to be done to influence better outcomes. And one of the things that might help influence better outcomes is to have the capability to get the necessary resources to achieve better outcomes for a community before a disaster strikes. So it's really knowing where those potential partners might be, or potential stakeholders. Again, using a reference from the Executive Academy, the fourth week of the Academy is creating a community of stakeholders. And we bring in people like Andrea Davis, who is the former vice president of global disaster management for Walmart and have been at Disney before, because every Walmart store in the country is authorized to offer support to every community whenever there's a disaster. But a lot of folks may not be aware of that. So instead of going out and trying to let contracts with potential vendors to get water or framing for temporary shelters or tarps or that sort of thing, Walmart may already have the capability to do that. So that's just one example. We also have Rick Newdorf, who had been the director of crisis response for Lowe's Corporation for years before he transitioned careers. But Rick can also talk about ways to develop those public-private partnerships that can really benefit us going forward. So, but again, a lot of that is trying to influence better outcomes and developing relationships during times before a disaster strikes, which requires a lot of hard work, and it has to be intentional and deliberate. Just can't wait until a disaster strikes and then get into crisis reactive mode to really make this work well over time.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next point of leadership is not a reactive skill. It's a proactive skill. I mean, you're actively doing what you need to do to care for others, to serve others, to lead others where they need to be. And leaders go to those that are following them. They don't expect followers to come to them, right? The leader itself will go to where they are, because that's where they're most comfortable. So how does an emergency manager, or what should an emergency manager be doing to do just that very thing? Because a lot of what I hear, and is a very common thing that I hear, and I've come from this as well, where I was the only person doing the job. So it was like, I'm a department of one. I'm the only guy doing it. I can't get. I'm alone, right? It's the mindset that we put ourselves in. And I'm actually doing a talk at the International Association of Emergency Managers Conference on this very subject. Is a department of one really alone? Because what are you doing or not doing that makes you alone? Because just because you're the only one doing the job doesn't mean you're the only one doing the job. So, and let me explain. So just because I'm the only one doing the job don't mean I can't build an emergency management team of those who support me in what it is that I do, and train them in a way and build them up in a way that lets them know that I have a support mechanism, because they know how important it is that I do what I do. It goes back to the marketing aspect, right? Of marketing myself within my organization. But one of the things I did in the previous organization I was in, I'm doing now, is I didn't just boil it down to build a team in where I currently am. I brought in outside individuals from the county, from the city, from other institutions that were like mine, to sit on that team, and we were able to collaborate and coordinate with each other. So, is an emergency manager who works alone, who's there, that's the only person doing the job, are they truly alone? So let me ask you this, and how we can apply this to emergency management moving forward, and establishing a different type of mindset with the professional in the job. How do we equip them in such a way that they are capable and confident to go out and do that very thing?
Yeah, that's a great concept, Dan, and a great understanding of the situation, because especially at the local level, a lot of times there will be one emergency manager in a city or a county area, and they're responsible for emergency management. And it can be overwhelming because someone sits at their desk and says, I'm responsible for all of these potential situations, and I am the only one. And it can become overwhelming, almost to the point of feeling paralyzed and hopeless, and not knowing where to go next. And I think it goes back again to understanding the notion of what we do versus who we are. No, and just because someone is the emergency manager in an army of one within a jurisdiction, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do everything by themselves. That's the role that they serve. So they need to understand, who can I work with and who must I influence to provide the support that's needed should a disaster strike, and reach out and develop those relationships before they really have to do that. So it's really kind of understanding the role a little bit better. It goes back to again, that process of influencing, because it is a process, and developing the relationships to end up being viewed as somebody that's got expertise and information that others don't have but need to be able to more effectively do their jobs. And again, it's hard work, but it's not. I think it's probably more helpful from a psychological standpoint of feeling like I'm here by myself and I have to do all of these things, and it's really more about coordinating all of the necessary support to help a community recover from a disaster. And your point about leaders going out to engaging with followers. I mean, as you know, my background is in my field is leadership development, so we could go well beyond the scope of our conversation today if we start to get into theories like leader-member exchange theory, and what is it that followers really accept from leaders, and what is the basis of that relationship between leaders and other members of the organization. But it's really a change of a mindset and understanding of what the role of who we are versus, I think, what we do specifically.
Well, yeah, and I agree, and I think a lot of it too is the same concept of when I teach people that I'm a mentor, and I teach people they should become mentors, but also teach people that they need to seek out mentors. And it's the same concept of thinking that you're going to have somebody approach you and say, I would like to mentor you. Odds are it's not going to happen. You're going to have to go to somebody and say, this is what I'm trying to do. Would you be willing to coach me, mentor me, guide me through this process? If you're in your office as an emergency manager waiting for the organization you serve or the community you serve to come to you and say, this is what I want, odds are it's not going to happen. So as an emergency, that's why I am such an advocate of the marketing aspect of what it is that we do. And there's so many different levels of it, right? So if you work, whatever level, I've worked at institutions of higher education. I've worked at city, county levels. So wherever you sit in the service of emergency management, you have different rings that you have to reach out to. So it's not just, I'm just going to reach out here and I'm done. No, you're going to reach out to lots of different people, lots of different organizations, lots of different departments within your organization to say, this is what I'm doing. Would you like to be involved? Versus they're not going to, odds are of them calling you up and saying, hey, what is it that you do? I'd like to be involved. It's very, very slim. So that's why I'm such an advocate of marketing what it is that we do, how we do it, why it's important, how people can support that. But in addition to that, and I've mentioned this to you before we went on the recording, was that we need to make ourselves so visible, because when it comes to budgeting, it's so easy for emergency management, public safety, and these things to have monies removed from them, positions cut, time, even if they're not going to cut the position, they cut the time in half. We need to be, but it's so easy to do because they're not visible. People don't hear about it. It gets done. Nobody knows it happened. But if you are visible, you are in the public eye, you are making yourself known, and you have people that are advocating for how important it is for you to be doing what you're doing. That is going to be so much harder to do everywhere, not just in a small organization decide, but a city, a county, a state. For them to say we're going to cut emergency management would be detrimental to their likability when it comes to politics and how they look in the public eye if they're cutting safety, cutting emergency management, cutting a position, and cutting funding. So what is it at a leadership level we need to be doing as an emergency management professional to make that possible?
And again, drawing on some of the content within the Executive Academy, Dan, in the very first week, we focused on the theme of examining policy and doctrine. So that really speaks to your recent comments about understanding the budgeting process and support for positions. And one of the most best received sessions that we've got in that first week is with Noel Kepler on presenting for impact and being able to make impactful presentations to understand how to communicate effectively to executives. And part of it is being able to communicate in a very concise but direct manner, because a lot of times, especially when communicating at the executive level, those folks that you're trying to communicate with or get some of their time may read lots of reports or receive a lot of information. So they're not going to spend a lot of time reading a couple page report justifying something. But if you're able to put together a really pithy, direct presentation, like an executive summary within a couple of paragraphs, or to be able to give a real quick elevator speech so that in less than 45 seconds, you can clearly indicate, here's what I can do for you, and here's the risk that if you aren't supporting what it is that I can do for you and what that means for you, that tends to get people's attentions. But now, even though a lot of times scholars as well as regular everyday folks consider effective communications a soft skill, it's always interesting that we call it a soft skill because it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
And again, it requires practice, and we need to be intentional and deliberate about what we want to do. And then craft that message and then be able to be consistent in broadcasting that message to all of the right people. So again, it goes back to that, using the informational aspect of influential leadership. It's providing the information in a manner that the people that are receiving it can absorb it and understand the potential impact on them and their careers if we don't have the opportunity to get the resourcing, and then to be able to be respectfully consistent and getting that message and what the potential negative outcomes could be if they don't support it.
That beautifully lines into what I want to transition into as we start to round out the end of this interview, is the consistency that you touched on a few times there with influence. I mean, ultimately, influence comes from trust, and trust comes from time and consistency. And that's one of the things I feel like we're lacking in emergency management is consistency in how we do our jobs daily. And some people call it a job, a career, whatever it is however you want to lay that groundwork. The consistency is lacking, in my opinion. And this is opinion-based is where we're going to go with this conversation. So with that, as we've noticed, and I've seen a big shift in this, and I've seen it myself because mainly that's where I'm going myself, is you see from the individual going into a job that works for another organization, a city, a county, a state, transitioning to a consultant who either opens up their own business or goes to work for an emergency management consulting firm, which we are seeing more emergency management in the private sector come to play. But how does that, in doing that, and I'm going that direction myself, is that going to be more beneficial or less beneficial to the profession itself of emergency management?
Another great question, Dan, and I don't know if there's a yes or no answer to that, because much like anything else, there's going to be varying opinions based on the number of people that are involved in a story. What the advantage of having many different viewpoints or approaches is that it provides the opportunity for somebody that's exposed to those to identify what the common themes might be that emerge among those consultants or other entities that they're engaging with. You know, it's much like studying any other field or topic. you try to read and get information on a number of perspectives and then identify where there are those consistent messages that evolve out of that. And then unfortunately, part of it is having the disciplined approach to say, this is my understanding of what is important, and the common theme that seems to be evolving from all these different messages. So that's really where I want to focus my effort. And that becomes difficult to do when there's a constant change in the people that you work for, or there's constant change in direction. And unfortunately, at some point in time, we're forced to make the decision. If I believe this is the right thing to do, and I feel that I'm doing the right things for the right reasons to better serve my community, if I'm going to end up being told that I'm wrong, I'd rather do it on my terms rather than somebody else's terms if I don't believe that it's the right thing to do. So part of it is, just coming to the point where we've got the moral courage to say, this is what I believe is the right thing to do. And again, hopefully you can develop the likability factor or the relationship so that the people will at least listen to what you have to say when you say, I believe this is the right thing to do, and here are the reasons why I believe it's right. And that it will have a positive effect.
I think there are huge benefits to both. Being an emergency manager that works for an organization myself, of course, knowing that they've put somebody in that position is a great first step. But a lot of what we're experiencing, and this comes from all of us having the same vision as emergency manager, whether you're a consultant or practicing practicing emergency manager for an organization, a city, a county, wherever you may sit, is that our message needs to be the same. And it's not, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like there's benefits to both. When it comes to these consulting firms could come in and really benefit a program, as long as there's someone there to keep it going when they're done doing what they're doing. And they need to be advocating for that. We'll come in and we'll do this. We'll set it up. We'll do your plan, blah, blah. But you do really need to have somebody that's in a position that can run this thing and keep it moving forward. I don't feel there's enough of that. Additionally, this is opinion itself. Those that are really putting those positions in place don't have a clear understanding on what it is that they're putting in place when it comes to the individuals that they are hiring, meaning that it's not necessarily emergency managers they're hiring individuals and they're putting these job posts together that incorporate environmental health and safety, fire safety, emergency management preparedness, and they're putting them like it's one job. Well, these are like different full-time jobs, and they don't have a clear understanding of that. I mean, that's one of the areas that I've experienced myself, is that you have to have a level of understanding on what it is that the job it consists of, and then being able to explain that to those who you answer to, being able to say that I have to spend so much time on this and this and this, and it's all portioned out in appropriately, or my whole job is emergency management, and this is why. There's still so much growth that we need to take place, but a lot of it comes from the individual doing the job, in educating and advocating for emergency management, which I feel like we are really lacking as a community. I think our voice needs to become one. We need to be all on the same page, as it is why we do what we do and who we are and why it's important. But that's more opinion than fact. So I don't get too much into that, but that's where I feel like that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping transition myself, because I want to help drive the profession forward. And I feel like I can do that better by teaching the professional the proper ways that we need to be doing the job, but also how to educate and advocate for emergency management in the current, wherever they sit. They may sit in a very small organization. They may sit at the state level or the federal level. And I think a lot of change is not going to take place at the federal level. It's going to take place at our level down here at the bottom, and we're going to influence the top. That's my personal view of things.
And that makes a lot of sense, Dan. Because a lot of people misinterpret the federal government's role and responsibility, and typically, through the federal government, doesn't necessarily legislate specific things that have to happen in certain areas, especially in professions. But once something evolves, it can develop guidelines and ways to sort of monitor what's going on and to put in some sort of constraints to make certain that there aren't any legal violations. But it really is up to individual states and jurisdictions, and that's what makes it more difficult. And I'm sure if we had forums like this to have these types of discussions 150 to 200 years ago with the fire service and law enforcement, we would have been having the same types of discussions because they were fledgling professions at that point in time as well. And things just sort of evolved over time because we identified needs and a better understanding of the role that those two entities played within the public safety realm. And we seem to forget that emergency management is still a fairly new field. So we're still evolving, and that's part of the difficulty right now is there's no established framework of saying this is what right looks like for everyone else. And when we've got 50 different states and 6 different territories and all of the subordinate organization jurisdictions within there, it adds to the confusion as well. And there's no one size fits all approach.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, I think one of the visions or the areas we need to kind of steer everybody is that we're all on the same page, and we are speaking with one voice when it comes to what emergency management is, who we are, and what it is that we do. And I feel like this could be a whole nother conversation, Dr. Garrett. We could go another hour. Just on what I'm about to say here is that there are so many different views on what emergency management is and how it's applied. And I feel like we are still trying to claw our way out. At least I feel like we should be, if we're not, out of the first response mindset. Emergency management should not be seen as, nor should we be acting as, a first responder. We are secondary, tertiary responders. We respond. If we do respond, but we are not first responders. We're not going lights and sirens to scenes, and we're not throwing on apparatuses and firearms. We are support, coordination, and we bring that collaboration to the industry. But I feel like a lot of where we are right now, we're stuck in the first response mindset, and we need to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I want to just before I close out, where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you or reach out to you? And then let's do one more notification where they can go get that application for the academies.
Again, you can go to training.fema.gov, and across the menu at the top of the page, and once you get there, you can select EMPP, the Emergency Management Professional Program link, and contact information for myself and all of our program managers for each of the academies. And the Public Information Officer program is on there. And that's also where the link to the application for the Advanced and Executive Academies can be found as well. So training.fema.gov, select EMPP, and you can get to where you need to be from there.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Garrett. As always, it's been a pleasure to talk with you and have this conversation and discussion with you. It's always great to hear what the programs that you are overseeing are coming out with and how they're progressing. But it's even more, for me, it's even a better conversation on how we can better, as thought leaders, influence the emergency management professionals and the emergency management profession as it moves forward in what we do. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this morning and be on the podcast and on the show. I look forward to the time where we can actually speak again, future date. I know that you do quite often podcasts and speak at other conferences. So I'd be looking forward to hearing those and actually advocating for those spots. If you let me know when you're going to be talking and stuff like that, I'll be able to let people know where to go find you and hear you and to connect with you. As I try and make clear to everybody, time is our most valuable resource, and I appreciate you giving me some of it today.
It was my pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me again. And hopefully we'll be able to do this in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. So all my listeners, please like, comment, share on this podcast. If you found value, please throw a comment in there, share with others who may benefit from it as well. Find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, where we're going to have a lot of these videos and postings. Also, you can find me on Twitter and Facebook. Connect with me. Direct message me if you have any topics, questions, or if you just like to connect in general. My name is Dan Scott. This was Theory into Practice. We'll talk to you next time.